I'm Nicole.
And I'm Alexa.
Hey girl, hey.
What up, what up?
What's up with you?
Another week, another life spent. I have to tell you, so not much going on. We've talked about this.
Naturally.
A lot.
Pandy life.
Yeah, quarantine. So the most exciting parts of my day really are just walking my dogs around the same block and seeing the same people on said walk. So now I've come to really notice the people who are on these walks with me. It's almost like a special affinity I have for them to see my best friends. But I got to tell you, there's this one guy annoys the living shit out of me.
Why? What does he do?
Can I tell you about him?
And naturally.
So I need to paint a picture. Okay. You're such a visual person.
I am a visual person.
You did well on our GameStop episode. So he wears the same outfit every day. He's an older man. He has to be in his early 70s.
Okay.
Terribly dyed brown hair. You know when people are so old and they still have like jet black hair and you're like, that's not right.
Yep.
One of those.
It just looks super unnatural.
Yeah, there's like dye on their forehead. I'm like, no, that's not. So he wears these blue shorts, kind of too short. He's very skinny and scrawny.
Okay.
Really little blue shorts and a white t-shirt.
Okay.
And I typically walk the dogs in the morning. My wife will walk the dogs at night. So I'd see this guy by myself in the mornings. And every time he's jogging, but it's probably a walk for us, right? But you know when they move their arms a lot, so they're like kind of jogging. And I swear to you, Nicole, only when he sees me does he really intensify his breathing. And I don't want to hurt your ears right now.
Don't do it.
But I gotta make you.
Do like a lighter version of it.
He goes, No, I swear to God, I will hear him before I see him.
So gross.
But you want to know what's crazy to me? The sounds stop as soon as he gets out of my eyesight. He passes me. I've turned around to be like, fool, are you alive?
It's a pissing contest.
Thinking that's his, I'm walking with my two dogs. I'm not trying to race you. So I've been telling my wife about this guy, right? And I'm like, it's the weirdest thing. I think he hypes it up when I get closer. I think so. And she Saturday morning, this past Saturday, she's walking with me on the morning walk.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh shit, there he is. That's the guy. Listen, he's quiet, right? I'm watching this fucker. I'm like, I know you're a one-upper. You just want to show off with your breathing. As soon as he sees us, and then he passes us, fine.
That's so gross.
Asthma fixed. I don't know what's going on.
You should start running past him and being like, you want to race? Like actual real people running.
I should. And I honestly can't tell you who would win out of the two of us. I'm not, we all know, I'm not the most fit person.
Okay.
But you know what? I probably can outbreathe him. I could probably exaggerate it up. But yeah. Ooh. Anyway, I don't know why he thinks this is impressive. Sir, if you're listening to this,
please stop.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure this is what you do after your runs. If you're looking for a legally judgy podcast, please just tone it down a bit. It's not impressive. You're not showing off. So anyway, that's my week. How about you?
Wow. Well, I too have a special affinity. It's a little different. Okay. So my husband is a huge sports fan. I mean, particularly basketball. He loves, when the season starts, he's like very into the news. He reads the ESPN. Like he's got this.
ESPN?
The ESPN.
Clearly you are too, huh?
He's got it all down. He gets it. That's his jam. Cool. So, of course I want to spend time with him. I mean, I could probably spend less time with him now that we're in the pandy. I'm just harassing him at this point. But, in my mind, I'm like, I just want to be next to you. So when he watches basketball games, my affinity is telling him who these people are married to. Because I feel like he needs the whole, perspective. Like he needs to understand what we're watching.
Yeah.
So I'll be like, oh, that's Savannah James's husband. And he'll be like, do you mean LeBron James? And I'm like, yeah, that guy, but it's also Savannah's husband.
That's Savannah's husband right there?
I mean, she's the one who's running the household and taking care of the kids. So I feel like she deserves to be shouted out.
So do you watch that reality show? What is it, Wags?
I used to. It's not on anymore.
Oh, it's not. I don't know. My wife, clearly I don't want it.
No.
When you said basketball, I was like the one with the ball?
They were, do they throw that? Or what happens with that one? No, Wags was also like C-level girlfriends.
Okay. So, Savannah's not going to be on that.
No, I mean, Savannah's making billions a year. She's like, you guys are peasants. I don't need this shit.
Well, I wondered if maybe she would make an appearance just to be like, you peons, but no, it's not how it works.
No, I think she's just too classy and too wealthy for that.
So your husband doesn't appreciate this?
I mean, no, he doesn't love it.
No.
He really doesn't love it, but I think it's fun, and now I just do it to troll him.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as someone who's into the gossip column section.
No, I almost like competitively prepare for these games by being like, okay, who's playing tonight? whose wives can I point out?
Yeah.
And so now it's just, it's a moment of tension.
Even though he's not impressed, you just insist on giving him this knowledge.
It keeps me interested. Like, if you want to spend time with me and watch the basketball, like, I should be able to point out their wives.
And I'm sure when he wants to watch basketball, he's thinking, this is a great way to connect with Nicole. So it's a good thing that you have this in mind for him.
I mean, he just ignores me a lot of time, but it's fine.
That sounds right. Sounds right. But you know what? Who unfortunately hasn't been ignored for years and years and years.
No, she's just being trolled.
My glorious soon-to-be wife, Sofia Vergara.
That feels disrespectful, but okay.
Real wife is okay with it. She knows.
Okay, all right.
Why don't you tell us about her?
So Sofia Vergara, love her very much. Mm-hmm. She's a Colombian-American actress, producer, and model.
Yeah, she is.
She is originally, like I said, she's Colombian. She grew up in Colombia. Mm-hmm. She went to school there to study dentistry, but left 2 semesters before she was done so that she could pursue modeling and show business.
So close. Imagine. If she was my dentist, I actively avoid the dentist.
You'd be there like every week?
Every day, actually. I'd be like, hey, doc.
You'd just be like going to bed with chocolate in your mouth, hoping you get a cavity.
Yeah, I'd just be destroying my teeth on purpose. Like, Sophia, can you save me?
Oh, man, you're a loser.
Wow.
So she moved to Miami in the late 90s, sadly after her brother was murdered during a kidnap attempt.
Ooh.
Super sad, but then, she was able to find some success for herself. So she originally hosted 2 Spanish TV shows on Univision, around that same time in the 90s, and then was able to break into the English-speaking film scene, in the early 2000s. And then eventually she obviously falls into the role that we all really know and love her for. So in 2009, she starts playing Gloria Delgado Pritchett on Modern Family.
Love it.
She has killed that fucking role. She's been nominated for 5 Golden Globes, 4 Emmys, and 7 SAG Awards. I personally love this show. It's one of my favorites. Sometimes when I'm if I have a break to eat lunch, I just need something really short and lighthearted, I'll put on Modern Family. I think she's a super funny character on it. My only critique of her role in that show would be that I kind of feel like she feeds into some stereotypes and tropes of Spanish people. But besides that, I feel like, she would know that far better than I would. So I'm going to defer to you, Sophia.
Yeah, the one I speak for all Latins, not just Mexico either, Colombians for sure. No, I agree. I think it's hilarious, and that's what I love more. That's what I love most about her. She is beautiful, and she's also really funny, because I feel like a lot of women who are beautiful, they don't get to be funny. They have to be more serious.
Yeah.
And I think she plays that role really well. And to your point, yeah, there are some stereotypes. I also have seen this show, actually rewatching it again right now. And I think they're funny, though. And I have to say, some stereotypes are true, at least for me. When she just goes off, I just wish that I could speak Spanish so I can get mad in Spanish. Oh. That's the one thing I envy about her.
I'll have to use some training, some tutoring.
I could do that.
Well, I mean, Modern Family has done her very well. She has been the highest paid actress on American TV from 2013 to 2020. In 2015, I guess Forbes said that she made approximately $28.5 million per year. And then in late 2016, they upped it and said that she's making around $43 million a year.
Insane.
Casual.
I will act out all of the Latin stereotypes if that's the money that it's going to get me, by the way.
I love it.
I'll act out any stereotype, whatever you need.
I truly love it.
$43 million? And okay, so that's her professional. Let's get a little into the personal. We have to for this one.
Let's get into it.
Her love life. Okay, so she was married once before at 18 years old to her high school sweetheart, who she has her son with, Manolo, who's very cute too. And they divorced in 93. In 2012, this is where the story takes a turn.
It always does.
I know. She gets engaged to this guy, Nick Loeb, after dating for a few years. They do call off the engagement, luckily, in 2014. So who's this guy, Nick Loeb? He's a businessman.
Sounds like nobody. I've never heard his name before.
Until
this, let me say that.
I have to say, too, once we get into the story, everyone will understand, but he's kind of funny looking. He looks like a sperm. I gotta say it. If a sperm had a face, it would look like him.
I have to go back and look at the pictures now.
Look at him. Look at him. And I swear to God, this is relevant to everybody who doesn't know yet why this is relevant. But just stick with me. Keep this in mind as we talk about Nicky Loeb. So he's a businessman. He's got this big family that has created several brokerage firms and global financial services. I don't know if you've heard of them, but we got Loeb on one hand and we got the Lehman.
Casual names.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Never heard of him
That's
before.
all. I'm not even going to say the rest of it. Just
Doesn't
Loeb
even
and
matter.
Lehman.
Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Done.
That's him.
Okay.
So he also tried to run for Senate a few times, and it didn't work out. Poor guy.
It doesn't really sound like much has worked out for him, and, you know, we'll dig into this more as the story goes on, but last I checked, he formed a condiment company, which included an onion crunch, which sounds absolutely fucking disgusting. I don't even know what an onion crunch is, but...
Onion crunch? Like the things you put on your casseroles at Thanksgiving? Or like, I think white people do it.
I was going to say it's a white people thing. I'm sorry, my
it's
friend.
It's like crunchy onions, and it's in like this like cardboard container. Well, that's what he tried to do?
I don't know.
It's shocking that it didn't work out for him.
I don't want to know either. I mean, good for her. She found better love life success and ultimately marries Joe Manganiello in 2015.
Huge upgrade. I love him. Can I just take a second to stand out?
Go.
I actually love the both of them equally. Like, she's definitely in my top 3. And I also have a list of straight girl crushes. Okay. Yeah, it's a lesbian thing.
If you were going to be straight.
Yeah, I was like, if I had to. He's definitely on there. So I feel like that's actually a perfect union. So, like, if I can't be with Sophia, I'm glad that Joe can be. You know, I'm like, I'd like tip my hat off to him. Like, you got it, Joe.
He crushed it.
I approve.
He crushed it.
Yeah, he's gorgeous.
Unfortunately, even though she got to marry Joe, she didn't really completely rid herself of Nick Loeb, who I'm just going to refer to as the D-bag going forward.
Okay.
He haunted her for some time. So while they were together, they had 2 embryos fertilized by IVF back in, I think, 2013. And those embryos were ultimately kept in storage at some medical clinic in California. And I, from what I understand, when they were signing up for this entire process and going to the medical clinic, they had to sign multiple agreements, you know, in connection with the fertilization and with the storage and the various elements of this process. Mm-hmm. And so one of the documents directs or kind of decides how the embryos will be stored and how they can be disposed of. And we'll call it, for all intents and purposes, a form directive agreement. So they had to enter into this agreement, you know, to kind of go through the fertilization and IVF process.
Yeah, and it's important to note, like you said, so it's very complicated, right? You're signing a bunch of agreements at one time. This is a big deal. So this form directive that you're talking about, it basically said, the one that they signed, I should say, basically said that neither of them can use the embryos without the other one's consent.
Right.
And that in the event that one or both of them dies, the embryos should be thawed and no further action taken, which is like an actual thing that's like part of the forms.
Okay.
You get to decide what will happen.
Right.
So that's what they decided.
Right. But so all of this, again, to set you know, some context, they entered into these agreements and did the whole process, obviously, while they were still together. So it was back in 2012, 2013. So allegedly, though, when they were splitting up in 2014, Nick asked to keep the embryos and pay for all of the expenses that it would take to raise them after they were brought to full term, and basically take on full parenting responsibilities of, you know, the children that result from these embryos. But Sophia very clearly is like, no, we're not doing that. These are my eggs, so get the fuck out of my face. And
he didn't like that. So what did he do in reaction? He files a lawsuit against her in California in 2014 after they split. Worth noting that initially he actually filed these court papers under anonymous names. It was like John Doe, Jane Doe.
Okay.
So he says that he tried to keep their, you know, their stuff confidential. But basically why he filed these suits was because he wanted to get custody of the embryos, and he wanted to order the clinic to allow him to bring the embryos to term without Sophia's consent, despite the contract that he signed, which again, we talked about, requires that they both agree to move forward or just do anything with the embryos. So he takes a very hard pro-life stance here. And we don't want to get into all the details of this lawsuit, but his main claims, he argues that the embryos are his living children, that Sophia is violating her duty of care by refusing to allow them to be born, that he's stepping in to protect them, and that Sophia, in quotes, wants to destroy them.
Which I don't know. I mean, maybe he felt that way, but I don't know if that's actually true, or if I would, you know, characterize that as the situation. I mean, my understanding is that she just wants to keep them frozen indefinitely. But I think his counter was that keeping them frozen forever is the same as killing them.
Right. And she talked about it. I think she went on Howard Stern and kind of said, you know, she is Catholic. That's a thought in her mind. But she they did this when they were together.
Right.
And to bring them to life now wouldn't really make sense because they're not together anymore. And that's not what she envisioned when they went through this whole process.
Right, which makes sense. And I think on the other side of things, he had this claim for arguing that they were living children, et cetera. But I guess the backstop, if that didn't work out, was him claiming that they actually had an oral agreement that supersedes or basically took precedence over the form directive that they signed with the IVF clinic. And he's saying that the oral agreement claimed that she agreed to let him implant the eggs in a surrogate.
Okay, that makes sense, right?
And I'm like, what? How, bro? When did she say that? What was the context?
Convenient timing after you break up.
Right.
I have to say, side note, that apparently rumors were that they broke up because she didn't want to have kids with him at that point because her career was taking off. So all this seems very convenient.
He's a scumbag. So he not only says that they had this oral agreement in place, he also says that the form directive contract is void for various reasons. But the main one he's saying is that he signed that contract under duress.
This is my favorite. Always duress.
Everybody's always signing things under duress.
You could tell he's like grasping at straws, right? He's like, no, I didn't mean it. There was an oral agreement. Wait, no, not oral agreement. Actually, the contract itself is void because duress, let's take it back.
Yeah.
What's duress? It's when a person makes an unlawful threat or engages in like coercive behavior, basically forces you to do something that you don't want to do. So he claims that when they were at the clinic and signing this paperwork, that she was just verbally berating him, just yelling at him, forced him to sign. And then to back this up, he basically says that she has this history of being physically and emotionally abusive toward him. In quotes, on many occasions, she's punched him, kicked him, threw her phone at him, has bullied him, called him a loser and worthless. I mean, all these things.
Listen, I don't want to get into the assault stuff because we don't know. We weren't there, obviously, and I think that's, if that happened, that's fucked up, and I'm sorry. You still suck though, Nick, because I think we know that these IVF clinics demand that you sign these agreements, right? And I'm sure I have a hard time imagining that she forced him or like physically or verbally assaulted him at this IVF clinic to sign this contract.
Yeah. She said that this was like signed a few weeks before. This was like their second round. You kind of mentioned this earlier.
Right.
So this wasn't their first rodeo. And so they both agreed how the embryos would be handled. And it's also not outlandish that both people should agree on how to handle the embryos.
That are ultimately going to be their children.
Preposterous. How dare you?
Right.
And then he also argued that if the contract isn't void, that the court should prohibit Sophia and the clinic from destroying the embryos under any circumstance, even if one or both of them die, which, like we said, the contract said if one of them or both of them do, then
nothing happens.
Yeah, they're just going to be thought out.
Well, and it's worth noting that Sophia and her team seem to kind of maintain that even though he's taking this super hard pro-life stance, he actually isn't as pro-life as he claimed to be, and that he was really just clout chasing because she was now, she's worth a ton of money at that point. She's 4 seasons into Modern Family. We know that she was at that point making around $28.5 million per year, allegedly. So they're saying that, he's just chasing the money. He's chasing the fame. This is not legitimate. This is not, he's not taking a reasonable stance. And I mean, I think that she may have been right about him. In April 2015, in the middle of this lawsuit, he basically writes an opinion piece for the New York Times, and it's really insane.
It's truly insane.
He's really like laying it on hard. What do you think?
No, there's no way. The timing of it is just crazy.
Yeah.
How are you going to go to the New York Times and write this op-ed? So to give our listeners a few highlights, he basically tries to say that what he's doing wouldn't impact her body or her rights, and he should be able to bring the embryos to term. And if she doesn't want to share custody, he'll take full custody and just declare her an egg donor. Problem solved. What do you think?
I mean, he's really dragging it. I think, the next point that he goes on to say is that a woman is entitled to bring a pregnancy to term, even if the man objects. So basically, why wouldn't a man be able to do the same thing if he's willing to take on all the parental responsibilities? But I think, it ties back to the first point, too. I just think that's a really flimsy argument. At the end of the day, like, just because she doesn't want to be a parent doesn't mean that she or anybody would maybe want to know, unless they had consented to it, to having their kids like born and out there in the world and just not being a part of it. I don't know.
And I'm sure when they first went to the clinic to do this, her thought was that she would raise them as
Right.
their mother.
Right.
Her idea in doing this to implant her eggs with his sperm was not so that she could be an egg donor for him.
Right.
It was so that they would raise the kids together.
Right.
This completely contradicts what I think. I'm 99.9% sure that was not her intent. And then the article goes on to say that he basically points to his lack of stable family unit growing up because his parents were divorced. And he was raised by a nanny. And I mean, his mom died at 20 years old, but I mean, and that's really sad, but it wasn't like at his formidable years, at like 3, 4, 5 years old. So I just love when people try to be like, oh, well, my parents divorced.
But even if it was when he was 3, what would that have to do with taking Sophia's eggs and having kids? Like,
Totally.
if you want kids, I get that. If you want to have a family and have a stable unit because you didn't get to, there are so many other options.
Why Sophia?
You could literally get a new girlfriend, wife, whatever. You could adopt a child. You could have a surrogate. Why do you have to take, this woman's eggs that she's not consenting to being used with you?
And it's dirtier too because they were together and now they're not.
Right.
It's not like she was like
She's
an egg
clearly
donor.
chosen not to fuck with you, bro.
Yeah, there's a reason why she doesn't want to take you back, and apparently, like, he begged her, and she said no, too. So it's just sounds very skeezy and controlling and gross. So so that op-ed. Now back to the lawsuit. So because much of the basis of his argument was the fact that he was so pro-life, right, kept emphasizing that these were his children. Sophia's lawyer brought into evidence the fact that his 2 previous exes actually had abortions. And they were granted a court order requiring Nick to identify those exes so that they could be asked about the nature of the abortions. He didn't want to do it, though. He said that he cared about their privacy, which may be true, but also maybe he's a little afraid if they come forth. And it was like, yeah, he doesn't care.
Yeah, like he went with me.
Yeah, his whole basis here is pro-life.
Right.
These are living children.
Right.
And then both your exes had abortions. Granted, I guess this was like some years before they were together, but still, right? Relevant. So it got to the point that the court told him basically that if he didn't go forward and provide that information, the case couldn't move forward.
Right.
However, important to note, I know we don't like to get too into the weeds with dates, but December 6th, 2016, before the judge could rule on Sophia's motion to dismiss, which again just means drop the whole case, let's not move forward with litigation, he actually asked to dismiss the case himself.
Right. So one day after, truly one day, so December 7th, after Loeb dismisses his California case, a right-to-live lawsuit is filed in Louisiana against Sophia on behalf of the 2 embryos who are named as the plaintiff, which is the person bringing the suit in legalese. And so he names them Emma and Isabella, which is creepy because there's an emotional element, sure, but now you're adding more emotion and more dramatics to it. And so this was the first lawsuit to ever be filed by embryos. And so it basically comes out that in November 2016, again, 1 month before Loeb dismisses his California case and 1 month before the judge says that the case can't move forward without knowing the ex-girlfriend's names, he gets this man in Louisiana named James Charbonnet to be trustee, and he has this man set up a trust for the 2 embryos in Louisiana, which thereby allows him to bring a lawsuit in Louisiana on behalf of these embryos. And this is technically because the suit needed to be filed by somebody who lived in Louisiana. So because Nick didn't live in Louisiana. It seems like he was in California, if not LA. But so to get access to the Louisiana courts and bring that right to live lawsuit, he basically had to jump through all of these hoops by finding this random guy to set up this trust so that he could bring the lawsuit there and try again.
Right.
And I mean, it's worth noting that he probably chose Louisiana because it's traditionally a pro-life state. And it offers special legal protections for frozen embryos that aren't offered in other states, and that weren't being offered in California.
So again, a huge reason.
Yeah. So
I'm suspect over here. I'm over here like, you skis bag. I know why you went to Louisiana.
Definitely a D-bag, yeah. So I mean, he has no ties to Louisiana, but he's really just trying to game the system so that he can take advantage of like what's being offered there.
My favorite part too, because I'm real nerdy and I was all up in this one. He tried to establish ties to Louisiana, right? Because it just makes the case stronger, right? He wants to really establish ties to Louisiana, take advantage of their pro-life laws. So he tries to say that actually like he and Sophia dated there. You want to know what that was? Do you remember that movie Hot Pursuit she was in?
Yep.
She filmed in Louisiana for 2 months.
I was going to say for how long? Like
that's what
day?
It was.
Okay.
While she was filming. It's not like he was there every day.
So that makes him a Louisiana citizen.
Literally, he is grasping here,
Okay.
Nicole. I'm so mad by this one, if you can't tell. I'm so mad. And then he says that he moved to Louisiana in December 2017. He apparently rented out this apartment. But then evidence came out that he actually didn't even stay one night there.
Wow.
Not one night. There were like no linens. There was nothing in the apartment. It was a vacant.
It's like a completely empty apartment.
Yeah, the manager had to go in to fix like some pipes. And so they called him in to be like, what? And there was like dust.
It probably looked like that apartment that girl found on the other side of her mirror in New York recently.
I think that's exactly. I think that's the apartment.
It's like dirt and ghosts.
It's like the equivalent in Louisiana. Yeah. There's another one like that. Watch out, people.
Watch out, guys. Nick's on the hunt. So, I mean, the intent of the lawsuit that he brought in Louisiana is basically to allow the embryos to be implanted into a surrogate so that they could receive the inheritance from the trust fund created for the embryos by this random James guy, Nick Loeb. And I think that there was some underlying intent to get some money from Sophia into that trust as well, because, I mean, where is Nick's money coming from? Since
where is his money?
He's making Onion Crunch. So... Yeah, so that's the whole intent of the lawsuit. So essentially, he's trying to terminate her parental rights by arguing that she abandoned and neglected these embryos by keeping them in the storage facility in LA. And so once again, he's trying to void the form directive agreement that they signed at the clinic, which, as a reminder, basically requires both of their consent to use the embryos on the basis that it violated California code and then also Louisiana law. But then he also brings back like all of his old arguments, being that, he signed it under duress and there was an oral agreement that she wouldn't destroy them and the contract wasn't clear on what would happen if they split up as opposed to dying, blah, 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 blah. Which he can do because he got his original lawsuit in California dismissed before the court could actually rule on anything, right? So, I mean, technically these claims were still what we call like ripe for being decided upon.
And that's the major key. That's why I'm so suspicious of him, because he withdrew his case before the California court could rule on it. I think because he knew he was losing. Mm-hmm. I think he knew it wasn't going well. Mm-hmm. I think he did his little research. I think he saw Louisiana. Yeah, Louisiana. A picture of Louisiana popped up. That trustee guy, that Charbonnet guy popped up. He's like, I'm the guy for you. And then he was like, I'm going to create a trust. Like,
that guy was probably like on a billboard when they were there.
He definitely
and
was.
He like took a picture.
1-800-NEED-A-TRUST.
We've seen a lot of billboard attorneys and trust people, but what are you going to do? Everybody has to get it how they live.
Look, if your lawyer's not on a billboard, you're going to jail. That's all I'm going to say.
So should we get on a billboard?
We definitely need to get on a billboard.
In 2017, the Louisiana judge dismisses the case that Nick brings and basically says the court has no jurisdiction over the embryos. And so jurisdiction is super complicated, but it basically refers to whether a certain court has the power or the ability to hear a case and issue any kind of ruling or order about it. And so, again, the judge here is saying we don't have jurisdiction over these embryos because they were conceived in California. And again, because neither Sophia or Nick had any permanent ties to Louisiana. So this judge is like, we have no stake in this game. This is not our issue to solve. Like, you have to take it elsewhere. And so they dismiss. But then Nick ends up appealing that decision, which...
Mm-hmm. It was pending. Until, well, we'll get into it. While that is going on, Sophia actually filed legal documents in California in 2017, asking the court for a couple different things. The main parts we want to focus on, she asks for declaratory relief and a permanent injunction.
Wow. What are these? What are you saying to me? What are these terms?
I just really want to impress you.
Break it down.
I know. I'm going to be you here.
Break it down.
Let me see if I can do it. So, declaratory relief. What is it? It basically refers to a court judgment stating the rights of the parties without actually ordering any specific actions or awards for damages. It's literally a statement by the court. So it really happens when someone is in doubt about their rights and there's some sort of conflict and they just want resolution.
Yep.
They want a court to say, you have this right, you have that right. Now, hopefully this avoids any further conflict and we don't need to sue over it, right? So if you can imagine... Why does Sophia want this?
Right. So in Sophia's case, she's saying that because Nick kept bringing suits over and over again for the embryos, she's basically asking the court to declare that any attempts by him to bring these embryos to term is a breach of their original agreement, the contract, so that she doesn't have to keep dealing with the same lawsuit and the same claims. And so getting this declaratory relief would also mean that he can't keep questioning whether the contract is valid or void and whether there was duress or whether there was an oral agreement, or like it kind of rules out all of these arguments from going forward.
Right. And then the other main part of her suit is she's asking for a permanent injunction. Okay. So what is it? An injunction is a court order that requires a person to do something or to stop doing something. Right. There are a couple different types, but the one that she's asking for, permanent injunction, it's typically issued once a lawsuit over the underlying activity, whatever they want to stop or to make someone do, is resolved. And this is distinguished from a preliminary injunction, which is issued while the lawsuit is pending. It really just lets the court flesh out all the facts so they can be sure if this is something that we should, make it permanent, because that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think similarly with Sophia, she's basically asking the court to block Nick from using the embryos without her consent. I mean, because they agree that it was only supposed to be subject to both of their written consent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we always do this. We talk about the legality, and we want to talk about the morality. So we're not going to get into a debate about embryos and his whole pro-life stance and all that.
We're here for the legal stuff, y'all.
Yeah, we're not going to get too political. But on a high level, we have this contract. What we want to talk about and emphasize is there's a contract at the end of the day that he signed when everything was okay, when they were in their relationship. And so is he really allowed to get out of it now?
I mean, it just feels like if that's the case, we would all just get out of contracts anytime we didn't like what they said, right? So I don't like my apartment anymore. I was under duress when I signed that.
Right.
And the lease now.
Right. Contracts aren't matters of convenience.
Right.
Right. So Sophia has said herself, it's selfish of him to try to bring these embryos to life, given their relationship and given that both would need to be involved in their upbringing. She obviously would feel responsible for these embryos.
Right. And it seems fair that she would have some say in what happens with, something that's like a part of her own body ultimately.
How dare you say that? What a preposterous notion that she would have a say in her own embryos.
Feminism. Well, so now in California, as Alexa mentioned, Sophia brings this case. And so basically in March or, this month, the judge ends up siding with Sophia. And so the court says that the agreement that they entered into was not the previous agreement, let me clarify, at the IVF clinic was not void, and it was not voidable based on Nick's whole duress argument. And the judge said that there is no evidence that there was ever an oral agreement that he mentioned that would,
That she said, post-breakup.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Go ahead,
implant mine. I didn't want to do it while we're together, but now that we're not, I think that's a great idea. Why don't you take them?
Yeah. And so the judge also grants her declaratory relief, acknowledging that Loeb, breached this agreement when he set up the trust for the embryos in Louisiana law, which I assume, normally she would have been a part of, right? And then also grants the permanent injunction, which prevents Nick from using the embryos ever without her explicit written consent.
I'm so happy about this, can I say? It really seems like he was trying to scam his way up. I don't know about you, but I feel like you'd agree. And
definitely agree. He's a scam artist.
Oh, I mean, it's just this one reeked, actually. I felt so I felt for her when doing this research.
He's just gross. Like, at least Joanne the scammer is funny. This guy is just completely a creep.
Yeah, and it's so suspect, too, a trust. I mean, I know it's a legal entity, but it's interesting because Louisiana, a big reason why he did it there was because Louisiana will recognize embryos as, people.
Right.
But so then why set up the trust, too? It just seems suspect. He says, like you said, jurisdiction, he wanted to establish that, maybe. But also, if she's the mother, then she would have to pay up for the kids.
And the trust.
Maybe spousal support.
He was just throwing anything at the wall.
Right. I think he's trying to get money from her because they weren't married.
Right.
So back to, that was the California court order that was brought by Sophia. Going back to the Louisiana case, remember you were saying that he appealed. So actually that one came out January of this year, 2021. And the court affirms the lower court's decision to dismiss his case. It's wonderful. And I have to say, I glanced over their 97-page document because this judge
some light bedtime reading for you?
Just some light stuff.
97 pages?
Yeah. I pointed that out because a lot of it, this judge was so mad at him. He basically said that it was obvious that he filed in Louisiana to try to take advantage of their more favorable laws, that it was clear that he had no ties to the state, and that his behavior, and actually his lawyer's behavior, that trustee's behavior, brings disrepute to and makes a mockery of the Louisiana legal system and the bar.
I mean, he was really reaching, to your point, grabbing for straws, throwing shit at the wall to see what would stick. I'm glad that the Louisiana judge was like, this is bullshit. Stop. This is enough. You have no claim here. These claims aren't valid. You have no ties to Louisiana. Please leave us alone now, my friend. And I mean, so meanwhile, obviously Nick is just getting blows from all over the place. He's losing in California. The Louisiana judge is basically cussing him out via opinion. And so Nick releases a statement, and he's saying that the California judge was influenced by Hollywood. And I'm guessing he's saying that because Sophia's famous and has fans, that the judge took the side of Sophia because the judge was also a fan. Like, I
don't know. Or the crazy liberals. I guess we get that a lot here in California, right?
I was like, I don't understand how she's being influenced by Hollywood, but fine. But then so he basically Catholic shames her and says she's intentionally creating babies just to kill them, and allegedly planned on trying to further appeal the Louisiana case to their state Supreme Court.
Just won't give up.
I'm sure it's not going to go well.
No.
And so, I mean, like the true gem that he is, he's now working on a movie about Roe v. Wade. I'm not even going to mention the date because I'm not promoting anything for this jackass. And so while he's doing all this, Sophia's over here working hard to try and help save small businesses in the pandemic. And she's working with like these organizations to provide microloans to people in need. So this woman is truly, she's moved on with her life. Right. She's got way bigger things to think about. She's happy with Joe. Sister's just trying to get her millions and keep it cool.
And this guy's just holding on. He's just holding on. Okay, so we talked about quite a bit, legally speaking, but basically Sophia wins, he loses. He's appealing in the Louisiana State Supreme Court, or to the Supreme Court of Louisiana. So I guess we'll see what happens there. But basically, so far, the courts have sided with Sophia. The contract is valid that they signed, that the contract said that both have to agree with what to do with the embryos.
Yep.
And if there is no agreement, then they stay as is.
Yep.
Okay, so what's our moral of the story? Give us some advice here.
Mine would be, don't try to scam your way into some money by using somebody's eggs who has since left you and hates you.
That makes sense. Actually pretty similar to mine.
What's yours?
I was going to say that if your girlfriend breaks up with you, let's not try to win her back by threatening to take, your frozen embryos and have another woman birth them and say, don't worry, honey, I'll take care of them.
That feels fair. These feel like reasonable things that we're asking for and advising.
And now do you see why I said he looks like a sperm, everybody?
Yeah.
Go Google him. He looks like a sperm. Like if a sperm had a face, that's him.
He's gross.
So don't be a sperm.
Hate him.
Don't be a dick sperm.
Bye. Bye, Nick.
All right. So thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Legally Judgy. We hope you enjoyed listening to us talk as much as we love the sound of our own voices.
If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Also, feel free to connect with us on our socials at Legally Judgy. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.